Here we have the main act for the day, Supriya Paul and Shobit Banga. These are the co-founders of Josh Talks. We first heard about Josh Talks through Pat Bird, who kept saying to us, if you want to be truly inspired by what young people are doing these days, you got to go speak to these two and to have them on beta.
So us old people, we're very excited about what you young people need to tell us and what you've been telling the whole world from the looks of it. What's going on, guys? Shobit and Supriya, tell us what you do and why you do it.
Awesome. So thanks for having us again. We were really looking forward to the physical splice, but this is awesome. And
so are we.
We would have been in Chiang Mai today. I mean, right now, if everything had worked out. Sorry.
Yeah, so we started Josh about 5 years ago. We actually completed 5 years in Jan this year when Shobit and I were both 20 and 21 respectively. I think the idea at that point of time sort of came from our own frustration. Both of us came from extremely different backgrounds. I came from a supremely academic sort of upbringing, typical North Indian family where the idea was to become a chartered accountant. And I was studying to do that till my second year in college when I sort of realized that, I've never even questioned my decision making. And I'm just going after the marks because that's what my parents sort of want me to get into. Like academics was really important for them, but I never took a step back to even think about what I'm doing in life. And that's sort of when things started changing a lot for me. And luckily at that time, I also met Shobit very randomly at a friend's birthday party. So now Shobit will tell you his story.
Yeah, I think it was pretty amazing. The fact that we met at this mutual birthday party, and we came from super different backgrounds. So I belong to a family where my dad sort of said, Shobit, you have to strive for the best, but forget about studies. Try something else, win somewhere else. So since childhood, I've been trying to figure out what else to do. I tried playing tennis at the professional level, and then I became a pretty good cyclist in India. I rode for the Indian team and things like that. I even raced in Thailand a bit with a few teams, but I think somewhere this frustration had set in that people have so much potential to go out there and do phenomenal things with their lives, but they just somehow the world works in a way where we're not able to, in an efficient manner, unlock that potential in people. And when Supriya and I met, we came from these two different backgrounds with the same frustration. And somehow it was just this phenomenal moment in that day when all we could speak about, we were like these two crazy people at the party who could speak about nothing apart from how do we fix this problem that most didn't even see was there, which was that, like if you, and because we are from India, we were primarily talking about the Indian context, that India is so large. And we truly don't even understand India deeply. So for example, a security guard in India who we would look at and say is relatively poor, is not going to have a great life, or his children are not going to be living like how some of us got to live our lives. That security guard who we are looking and saying all that to is top 10% richest Indians. That's how poor India is, and that's how large this problem is. So if in India you earn 30,000 rupees a month household income, your top 10% around 30,000 rupees a month. And it was thoughts and ideas like this that really got us to question how to optimize our time from.
Shobit, your internet is breaking. Do you want to switch?
Probably what I can do is, let me try.
Yeah, it started to fall apart just as it was getting exciting.
Yeah.
So why don't you continue for 2 minutes, and I will just fix something and come back.
Yep.
Cool. I like how Shirley's saying that there's so much suspense.
I know. We're just building and building and building that story.
But I was really shocked to hear that yes, you're right. I mean, I'm way out of touch. I haven't lived in India for a while, but yes, 30,000 rupees a month puts your security guard, who has to stand up every time he opens the gate for you, in the top 10 richest people, top 10%.
Absolutely. And another, super interesting stat, something we're all well aware of also, is that 95% of India actually doesn't speak in English. And here we are, very comfortable having this conversation in English. So almost 95% of people in our country wouldn't even understand this. And that's something, I think those two sort of insights together brought us together, and I think gave us a lot of josh. So josh actually is a Hindi word which means drive or enthusiasm. So there was no question about what we're going to call it, and the idea really was that how do we give this 15-year-old or 16-year-old sitting in a small town or village in India, now connected through Reliance Jio, using his smartphone, the power of josh, or the power to get up and do something big in his or her life. And yeah, that's where it all sort of started for us. So I'm just going to share my screen now and just take you guys, we will take you guys quickly through the journey and sort of how we evolved from day one to where we are now. A lot of learnings along the way, a lot of insights that actually helped us develop multiple products catering to the same user group. So I'll just share my screen and we'll get started. Perfect. Shobit, do you want to start?
Yeah, I'm back. Am I audible?
Yeah.
Perfect. Just waiting for my screen. Yeah. Awesome. Perfect. So the whole, I think Supriya shared a bit as well. The whole, when we look at India, there's, and I'm sure it's very similar in a lot of other countries around the world, so turning an insight into an idea, the insight that we saw that was remarkable was that people want to do well. And this is may sound like an obvious thing, but in India it wasn't an obvious thing, because we were coming out of various things that were happening, because of which it didn't necessarily suggest that people wanted to do well. So if you look at a security guard and if you look at his son, he wasn't saying, or what we noticed was that it was surprising that he was saying, I want a better life. He had this itch that he wanted to go out there and do well. He wanted to change the situation and the condition that he was living in, that he was brought up in. He wanted to give a fantastic life to his parents. And that was sort of like the insight that we saw, that there's this itch people have, but they're not able to scratch it because the world just doesn't work like that for them. So that was the insight that we decided to convert into an idea. And the idea here was to create all resources and tools that can help scratch that itch, that can actually take that security guard's son and give him the opportunity of a fantastic life. And that's where we basically, over the life of our past 5 years, have come out with 4 products, 4 things that we do to help that kid go out there and do something fantastic and phenomenal with his life. Now, before I get into these 4 things, I want to draw a parallel. So in India, we have something like the idea of a bade bhaiya, which means like an elder brother. It's somebody you look up to, somebody you aspire to be like, somebody who sometimes holds your hand and helps you go to places, take decisions, help you take decisions. So I'm sure even all of us in our lives while growing up have called up a friend or a colleague or something and asked, I'm thinking of switching my job. Do you think it's a good idea? Or if we look back at a little bit closer to our childhood, when we were trying to probably make decisions about our college and what to study in college, who did we speak to make those decisions? How did our parents guide us in the kind of decisions that we took in life? So I think if we look at India, there's a very similar parallel that we can draw. We call this person a bade bhaiya. It's a very emotional connection you have with this person. It's like an elder brother. And that's what we aspire for Josh as a brand to be for India. That when people look at Josh, they shouldn't see a skill app that skills you. They should see an elder brother in you. And that's the aspiration here. So we created 4 products around that thing, that what does an elder brother do for you? So one of the things the elder brother does is he opens your eyes up to possibilities the world has to offer. And that's where Inspire comes in. So the first product is Josh Talks, where we showcase stories of people who've gone out there and done phenomenal things in their life with the world. Am I audible? It feels like I may not be. Yeah, okay, perfect.
You're good. We
So-
can hear you perfectly.
All right. So that was the first product, where this is something similar to, so for example, we've all heard of Steve Jobs, and we know that that is to some extent the epitome of what mankind or a person can go out there and achieve. And for different people, it may be different things. But for a kid growing up in a village in Bihar, he doesn't have that. He doesn't know who Steve Jobs is. So we went on the road and we asked people in India who is Elon Musk, and most people think he's a vegetable. So how do you create these parallel relatable role models for India? And that is the only way to inspire. We don't believe that the way to inspire is just to say some motivational sentences that Muhammad Ali has said. I don't connect with Muhammad Ali. I don't know who he is, or at least the 90% of India definitely does not connect. So who are the role models of India? They end up being politicians and goons and sometimes film stars, and that's not necessarily a large enough option pool for you to choose from. And who you look up to is directly related to what you go out there and become. So that was the first product that we created. This is still our main product. It's Josh Talks, and it's closest to our heart. When we started out from college, this was the first thing that we created. The second is Josh Skills, where we inform people about. So another thing what Bade Bhaiya does for us is helps us take career decisions, and that's what Josh Coach is. It answers career-related questions for you. The third is Josh Skills. This is what we are primarily working on at this moment, at this point in time. This is our biggest bet. This is third product, where what we do here is that there are some skills that all of us have that are very critical to put us in this position that we are in. And these are a lot of the time, these skills we acquire not by going to skill classes, but just because of the kind of homes we are born in. For example, speaking English, a lot of us may belong to countries where English is not the primary language, or what our grandparents spoke. They may have spoken a different, but we ended up learning English. That was because of the home that we were brought up in, the lifestyle that we grew up in. Or, for example, learning computers is another skill that we have. We don't even call it a skill. We never went to computer classes, probably. And for 90% of India, they don't know how to speak English. They don't know how to use the computer, and a lot of other skills like this. For example, I recently asked our office boy, who's something like somebody who takes care of the office, cleans the office, etc., that what do you do with the salary that you get? He said, I withdraw it from the bank immediately because he believes banks are not safe. So he keeps cash at home, which he finds safer. So this is the financial literacy of India, of real India. So what your skills does is that it goes into people's lives like a mobile phone app, and through various courses gives them information that can help them that can help put them in a position like a lot of us are at, which are sort of critical to go out there and do well. And finally, the fourth product is Josh Jobs. It's sort of completing the circle. We've run a beta of this product, and it did phenomenally well. It's a pretty obvious product. We have a different angle to it, but I'll let Supriya take that on, and I guess we can go from there.
Perfect. So, like Shobit said, the first thing that we started out was by showcasing stories of relatable role models. For the first 1.5 years in our journey, we were, doing offline events across India where we had speakers who came and shared their stories. And we had an audience of about 300 to 500 people who actually attended these events. But while doing that, we realized that the amount of time and effort that we were actually spending in curating these talks wasn't translating into the scale of people who were attending it. And that's when in 2017 is when we decided to take the decision of taking Josh Talks online. And that's sort of when our journey, we feel, really began for us. One is because we understood that we weren't catering to the English-speaking audience, so we automatically switched to Hindi, and soon after we launched in 6 different regional languages. So as of today, we are in 10 vernacular languages in India, which cover both languages of the North and the South. So languages like Marathi, Bengali, Tamil, Telugu, Punjabi. And we use YouTube as our primary medium of distribution, and we average about 45 to 50 million views every single month. But I think the most interesting part, or the sort of learning that we got from Josh Talks and launching in regional languages while working for the same target group across these languages, was that each language is almost like a unique country in India. So while when we started Hindi, we were trying to use whatever we learned in Hindi in a plug and play sort of model with Marathi and Bengali. But what was amazing was for us to sort of realize that the aspirations are completely different. While somebody who is, from a Hindi medium background or has a primary language of Hindi may aspire to become, to get a government job, and that probably is the number one aspiration even today. But somebody who's speaking in Marathi and Bengali is actually more interested in business or in starting something of their own. So we used all of those insights to actually build categories across different content, across different channels. So even if you check out our YouTube channels, each channel almost has an individual identity and a different content strategy that they follow, because the target audience changes from channel to channel. The second thing was the next obvious step, which was that, once you've seen a Josh Talks, once you've seen the story of, say, a local shop owner who's built a business and now is earning 50,000 rupees a month, and you're inspired, there are still some barriers for you to actually become that person. The first thing is access to high quality information on that particular career. There are multiple websites right now which talk about multiple different things. There is stuff on exam prep, etc. But there was no one-stop destination or a platform that actually gave detailed career information in a step-by-step format. So if I was today to become an IAS officer, what are the forms that I would need to fill? What kind of education would I need for it? What kind of courses would I have to do? Where would I have to study? What would the investment be, etc. And similarly, if I was to start a business like a beauty parlor, where can I buy my combs from? Or how can I set up shop? So we decided to create this information in an extremely engaging manner and launched Josh Kosh in 2019, which is just a high powered text platform where we have almost 2,500 word essays on different careers, and that continues to generate about 3 lakh to 4 lakh sessions each month. The insights from Josh Talks and Josh Kosh is what led us to sort of create Josh Skills. And like Shobit said earlier, the idea really was that how can we use the power of technology or a mobile app, and through a minimum intervention of, say, 60 to 90 days, give someone the skill sets required to earn more or get his or her first job. So we started out with the most obvious course, which was English speaking, which is the biggest barrier in our country right now to get a professional or a corporate job. And we moved from that by understanding our audiences and launching courses across different categories. So whether it's self-growth or self-development, covering things like personality attributes, communication skills, etc., to starting your own business and learning about tools that are available in today's day and age, or it's professional skills like graphic designing, coding, etc. This is a platform that caters to everything, again in Hindi and in Marathi. So our idea with all the platforms is that we are not for the English speaking user who's already been catered to and has enough destinations on the internet to go to. Everything that we do is in Hindi and other vernacular languages. And yeah, Josh Jobs is something that we're still sort of piloting, so we don't have enough material on that, but we are seeing early signs of it doing well. I think one of the interesting things in this journey for us sort of has been that we were both hell-bent on building a sustainable business out of it. And although it was an extremely difficult challenge, at least in the first 2 to 3 years, we used the insights that we got from our audience to create tailor-made campaigns. And as of today, we are working with organizations like Google, Facebook almost exclusively in Southeast Asia for the youth, United Nations, ITC, Oxfam, UN Women, etc., on modules and programs and campaigns that advocate for gender equality, economic growth, and poverty alleviation. And yeah, so I think this is the summary of everything we've sort of learned along the way. I'll let Shobit go into the details of it, but the three things primarily are accessibility, affordability, and relatability. So Shobit, you can take this. I'm not
We
sure.
look, yeah.
Yeah.
In the meantime,
Yes, you've got
Sorry, I'm still
considerable
trying to figure out.
delay going on.
hey, no worries. Take your time. In the
Don't worry
meantime,
about
Rishana and I were just going on about how amazing these insights are, and just just being blown away by not just the insights, but the passion that both of you have in describing this situation and the opportunities that are out there. So rare.
I'm really amazed. I mean, I was telling Alan just now, not to be sort of bombastic or anything, but I was just telling him these guys are replacing the education system in India. And that seems to be the problem to be solved. You're making education accessible in a way that it should have been, but never was.
Absolutely.
Yeah,
and I think that continues to be our goal. So, eventually, sorry, I think Shobit's got a huge lag. But anyway, so eventually our goal is to continue to create, other tools, apps, and products that do solve for the same problem. So whether it's, creating curriculum of actual school education in Hindi and other languages, which again doesn't exist online, to, even getting into, say, financial services in the future for student loans, for people who come from smaller towns and cities. So we want to, like one of the biggest influences in my life was my dad. And although his direction or advice may have not been the best, but at least I had someone to go back to again and again, and learn from and seek, direction from. So our goal really is that everything that our parents sort of do, just, our parents have that kind of exposure where we trust them to make the right decisions for us. But for people who come from an economically weaker background, for people who are uneducated, how can we do that for them? And that's sort of the thought process when we create each product at Josh.
We were talking earlier this month, we had another session with this startup from Cambodia called Wapatoa, run by these two incredible young women. And when we asked them first, we met them in Phnom Penh last year, we asked them what they did, and they said, well, it's mainly trying to teach young people how to be adults. And this was the problem to be solved. This is the problem they set out to solve. And it's kind of where you are, but at scale,
That's right.
Which is amazing.
And the fact that you want to get into fintech as well blows my mind.
I know,
like,
man.
What?
I mean, personal finance, right?
That's awesome.
Yeah, I think
How are you doing, Shobit?
Still some time away.
I'm back. Yes, I think now it's working properly. Can you guys hear me?
Yeah, we can.
Yes, indeed.
Absolutely.
So this is another
Awesome,
problem
fantastic.
to solve. Connectivity still continues to be a problem for all of us.
I hear
In the middle
you.
of Gurgaon, huh? This is the middle of Gurgaon.
In the middle of Gurgaon. Yeah, that's right.
This is the tech capital of the north, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, it is. Probably of all of India now, after so many amazing companies coming out of it in the last 2-3 years. But yeah, it still seems to be a problem. I'm sorry about the bad
Hey,
connection.
Not at all. We're hanging on to every word you two are saying. This is so inspirational. Please, Shobit, go for it.
Awesome. So I think I was talking about so accessibility, affordability, and relatability. So I think I'll start off with relatability because I think it's closest to my heart. It's something that, even before, you're finding it out, it's like sometimes you just know things, and relatability was obviously one of them, because I think even if we look at our own lives, we all look up to people. And if we look at the description of those people, if we try and describe them, there is so much similarity between our own lives and their lives. So it is the parallels between two people's lives that make them relatable. and you only connect with people where there are many parallels, but outcome may be drastically different. So there's something that's in the outcome of that person's life that you look up to so much. So I think one of the things that so what happens, and I think this is one of the biggest things while creating or trying to add value to the underserved. Now, when it's not so, until now we have created product for our own kind. We have created products for the elite, where we are the users of those products. For the first time, because the internet access has gone to the grassroots of the countries, we are now creating products for somebody else. And I think that it's very important to establish that difference, because until now, relatability was obvious to us. Google built Google for the people who created Google to search on Google. But now we are creating your skills for not you and me. If we go on the app, it'll almost be, what the hell is this? The UI sucks. Change this, change that. Who uses blue color anymore in this tab? But we are not creating this for us. So a lot of the things that are obvious, you have to go back and say, no. We have to rethink this. And go back to the first thing, the first pillar of making it work, which is relatability. Steve Jobs doesn't work for this world. The reason until now we didn't need a Josh Talks was because Steve Jobs already existed, and a format of the world already existed where there was enough conversation about people at the top of the world, and they were all relatable to us. For this audience, there is nobody relatable. And I think that even Josh Talks is not able to do the job, where even Josh Talks is getting people who are of a certain education level. They're of a certain, their starting point is not as low as probably the starting point of 50-60% of our country. So I think even still Josh Talks is not able to do that job of being able to build relatable role models. The second is accessibility and affordability, and I'll sort of put them together. It's sort of obvious, right? Because if we look at, if we are paying 300 rupees for a McDonald's burger, we are not actually paying 300. We are paying a percentage of our household income, and that ratio needs to be maintained when we are charging for a skill course. Now, if we paid, I don't know, let's say 5,000 rupees for a course online, and our income was X, and there was a certain percentage of our income that we spent on that course. Now, when we are creating for this audience, we can't just come up with another number. That ratio needs to be maintained. It needs to be, we wouldn't be taking that online course if it was more expensive than that. So affordability should be much more obvious than I believe that currently is. And it doesn't need to be zero. So most of the products that are created for the underserved are trying to be at zero, or there is a gap. So everybody is sort of questioning Josh when we are charging a ridiculously low amount of money for the courses that we offer. So we charge 300 rupees. So that is about 21, about $3, $4 to learn English. Right now, that seems ridiculously low to us because we would pay $400, but the ratio is the same. Probably it is still too high if we actually have to go to the masses in India. So the question becomes, before starting the business to serve the underserved, can we build a successful business charging such a low unit price? And it's a very real question to ask that until now didn't need to be asked, but now needs to be asked, because now you cannot charge, or you can charge, because the people will even go out. I think the underserved is willing to pay a much higher percentage for education than what we are. But if you have to create real large scale change, at a very, very mass level, and not just focus on building a unicorn company, because like there is so many people will definitely be able to build a unicorn. There will be enough number of people who will be willing to pay 20,000 rupees or $400 for that English course. But I think the focus, if is change, then it has to be large enough and prices have to be thought of accordingly. So affordability, according to me, is this ratio that has to be maintained. We've already done it for so yeah, I think, and accessibility, at the end of the day, it's I think they go sort of hand in hand, affordability and accessibility. So I would also think of accessibility from this point of view, that okay, what is accessible? So lots of people ask us, okay, why don't you have a Josh Skills desktop version? Okay, why don't we have a web app for George? Like, what do I say to that? Like, it's like, so it's something like that. So I think I think it's more important to think of accessibility from that point of view. There are 600 million people who have smartphones. I think that's not the key number to look at. The key number to look at is that every single household in the country now has a smartphone. Because smartphones are shared, that means every single person in the country has an access to smartphone. In the morning, the father uses it. When he comes back from work, the child uses it. Now the child definitely uses it because the father wants him to use it, thanks to COVID, because he has to study in the evening. So now there's true access that there didn't exist even until six months ago. So I think from a product creator point of view, so if I have to summarize, the one thing is that we have to very clearly differentiate between, now we have never created product for somebody else. Today is the first time that we are, and therefore we must rethink a lot of the things that are obvious, that we consider obvious. So yeah, that's it.
That's amazing. I mean, this is kind of reminding me of something you said, Kuril. If you're still on the call, you said, in Kuril's talk, he talked about, display passion, not emotion, and it's exactly what we're seeing from you guys. And it's so articulately put. What the first thing I had to say was, I'm a product designer technically, and we kind of all are. And we think about media products, and we think about, when you're doing design thinking, you think about empathy. But you seem to have crossed that invisible empathy barrier. And that's kind of exciting to me, because you can have empathy with people who right? These are the PLUs, right? They're people like us. We can have empathy with them because we understand their problems. We understand their, persuasions. How do you have empathy for a person that lives in your country, that stands up every time he opens the gate for you, your security guard in your building? How can you have empathy for somebody you don't know, whose life you don't know? And you guys seem to have crossed that. You pushed through that barrier completely. I'm trying to understand what school of design thinking, you guys would be able to run, and you guys have a lot to teach us in the media business, which finally, after all of that, leads me to my first question, which is, do you think of yourselves as a media company?
Exactly. I was going to
So
go
if I
for
can
that as
take
well.
that, I would say,
Well put.
definitely not. Definitely not. We
Thank God.
think of us.
Goodness.
So I would say this: I don't care about anything apart from unlocking human potential. So if tomorrow there was an injection and you could put it in people and you could unlock human potential, we'll be an injection company. So for now we are media, because one of the very big parts of unlocking human potential is to create a narrative. And to create a narrative, just like the American dream. What is the American dream? Is this belief people have that they can come to this country with no money in their pockets and still make something of themselves. That's the American dream. Now that's a narrative that doesn't cost money to build, and that takes media to build. You have to say that again and again and again and again, and say it in sly ways, and be intelligent about it, about inputting that message again and again. And that's why we are a media company today. Every time a speaker goes on stage and talks, he echoes that it doesn't matter where you come from, you can go out there and you can make a life for yourselves. And that's why we are a media company, because we needed to create this narrative, not the other way around. Not now we're a media company, now we'll create a narrative. So one of the things that we need to do is create a narrative. That's why until now we were a media company. Now the next thing that we need to do is create a product that can actually help people achieve career goals. So now we are a tech company. Now we're building an app, and we're calculating customer acquisition costs, and we're doing this and that, and we're trying to master that. But yeah, I think different phases will make us different companies. But what will help us navigate through this life and through this journey is the ambition to unlock human potential.
That is amazing. I love the fluidity in crossing boundaries. I think, you know, one of the things that we absolutely try to do at Splice is to widen this definition of what a media company looks like, sounds like, X, you know, like, and I love the fact that the both of you have such a clear vision of what your impact is, and you're not really fussed about the labels that come around you. And I think maybe the benefit of this is that both of you don't come from journalism backgrounds, and so you're not locked into a lens onto the world. So I wanted to ask both of you. I mean, like Shobit, you were on the track to being a national athlete, and for a while you were. But like, how did that shape your point of view? You know, around coming up with this view of the world. You know, what is this lens, and how did you get that?
Right. Just compiling my answer 1 second.
Spoke like a true developer.
But Supriya, I mean, maybe you can take that
Sorry.
that question as well while he's compiling his his answer.
Compiling code.
Go ahead, Supriya. Why don't you go ahead? I think you're on mute.
Oh, you're on mute.
Sorry, the number of times I've heard it, this line this month. But I don't have an athlete lens, so I don't know how I'll be able to share that. But I do have a sort of a business or an accounting lens. And I think the only way that it sort of actually helped us is to, you know, really pin down everything and to structure down every single thing. So it's almost like, you know, there are 5 elements to making a talk work. And I think that sort of analytical bent of mind has helped in figuring out exactly what those 5 elements are. And how can we repeat that again and again and again? So yeah, but other than that, I think after having completed my graduation and been academically inclined, I do not believe in academics anymore at all. And I don't believe that a degree that you do in college actually defines who you can be. So that changed completely after starting Josh. Yeah.
Amazing.
Awesome. I have my answer compiled.
Go for it.
Run it.
You know, I face this a lot because. So, anyways, I think so. What sport did and the role it played was basically did 2 things. The first thing that it did, and I think it happens with any athlete, is that you find out the limits to the real limits to a human potential. So let's say I used to cycle, and there is this uphill that you have to go on, and it's actually like a flyover on a mainstream highway. It's a very long flyover, so it's a very long uphill. So what I mean by really testing your limits is, let's say you're a team of 8 people and you start riding uphill on that and sprinting. So what happens is that you reach a point where you can't go any faster, where the pain is too much, and there is no way to do better at that point in time. And then people start to drop off. And that to experience is so rare that I realized in life that when did we last put ourselves to the limit that we can't do no more? It's just like, and then it's really interesting to see what happens. So I think that view of what happens after is just beautiful and very rare to see. So I think sports forces you to do that. Another way sports forces you to do that is, I was an endurance athlete. So I was an endurance cyclist. That means that I do long distance cycling. Now in long distance cycling, what happens? You can't sleep because the races are super long. So let's say it's a 600-kilometer race. And so you just go throughout. Now, when was the last time we didn't sleep for 30 hours? So I think it does that also here, where you push a limit. And it's just the, like, I don't think any of us would at home try to do that, right? Because our lifestyle is not requiring that, but sports naturally starts to require that of you. So I think the first thing that sport did was testing of limits, finding out what is the real limit to a potential. So I think that was really interesting. The other is that, and the other was a really interesting experience, was that especially during cycling. So we were a team, we were 12 people in the team, in my final team. And my best friends were these guys who used to actually work at the cycle shop and earn 7,000 rupees a month. 7,000 rupees a month is $100 a month. That was his monthly wage that he ran his entire house on. and everybody was like that apart from a couple of people. So what again I got to see was that what is even happening here? Like, is this a goddamn joke? Like, how can we expect anybody to go out there and try to be the best they can humanly be when they have to worry about what is their mother going to eat tomorrow morning? How can it's just there are some basics you need to get through to be able to unlock human potential, and that was so frustrating that I actually decided to give up sport completely because there was something else that was more important to do. So two things.
Wow, I'm constantly, I'm reading the chat box, and we're talking to each other, and I'm constantly hearing and seeing the word speechless. We really are. I mean, you really are rendering us speechless. But speaking of speechless, Pat Bird, why don't you be speechful with your question?
Sorry, I had to unmute myself. So I'm speechless. I'm very impressed by your work. What is the one lesson that you've learned throughout all this? And I say this because, as you can see, this is a very conversational group that like to share. And then something that you might wish you had known before you started, or as you got onto this path, that maybe you can share for others to implement and or learn from.
Supriya, you want to take that?
I think I'll have to compile my answer on this one. Okay.
I love the way you guys do that.
No, I don't have a notebook, unfortunately. But so I think I don't know if I can sort of pin down on one particular lesson, because I think with every year, with every new product, there has been something supremely different. But I think, to answer your second question before, which was that something that we would do differently or any mistake that we learned from, what happens along the way of creating what you sort of do is that you start losing touch with the audience that you really work for. And although they're there at the back of your mind, there are times when you're not doing everything that you should to stay in touch with them on a regular basis and get insights to then implement in your work. So I think one thing that if I had to redo would be that I would sort of make more of an effort to be in touch with our audiences directly. And also something that we are now consciously doing is that hire people in our team who do belong to the same target group or the same target demographic, because the insights that they give. So us as people sitting in Delhi and Gurgaon trying to create content for somebody sitting in a small village in Bihar just doesn't make sense. There is so much that we wouldn't know. But having somebody from that village who's really come out of that struggle and build a life now working for us, which does exist in the team today, is something that's really going to help us in our journey going forward. And I think the biggest lesson personally for me is, as a person has been that if you don't ask, the answer is always no. And this is something that one of my mentors actually taught me. And I was a complete introvert. I never used to question anything. I never used to speak to people. I always felt that there would be judgment from the other side. But I think everything that I've done over the last 5 years has just been in going to random people and asking them for help or asking them questions. And yeah, so that would be my lesson.
Thank you.
If I could just follow up on that one before we jump to Sandeep's question, just because you said something really interesting there, Supriya. So what was it like when you first went to MDIF and asked for an investment? Do you remember what that meeting was like? How did you sell the company, so to speak? Or was it the other way around?
We'll ask the MDIF people on the call to put themselves on judgment screen.
You meet somebody and you feel like there's an automatic connect. And I think that happened with MDIF. I wasn't even a part of the first meeting because I wasn't in town. But then the second time that I actually was a part of it, when we met Coreel, and then we went on to meet everybody else. We met Kevin and Key. We've met different sets of investors, and the questions were a world apart. The first thing that they said was that, we need to check if you even meet our metrics of impact. And that's something that we were sort of blown away by, because nobody has even asked us that question on, what kind of impact were we creating? Because when you go to financial investors, it's always about what is your funnel, what is the CAC, how many users do you have, what is your DAU/MAU ratio, and those questions that we're used to answering. And here was somebody who said, I don't care about everything else. I mean, I do care about it, but my first layer of approval is if you're actually creating impact. And I think that's when we sort of were decided that if there is one partner that we would like to work with, it would be MDIF. And that's sort of where it all started.
Mind blown yet again.
And
Sandeep,
I'm not saying it
what are you jumping with your question while I gather my thoughts?
Thank you. Also very blown away by what you both have said. Thank you. I had a question about how you maintain that engagement, and maybe it's about journey mapping of your community. So many different people engage. I mean, millions and millions of people who are involved. How do you then piggyback on their engagement to create that ecosystem so that they can support each other? Or, what's the second step after a person starts to engage with you for a little bit of time?
Sure. Shobit, do you want to take it, or do you want me to?
Sure.
Yeah.
I can share a little bit, but my answer is not very good. So probably Supriya, you can take it after that if you're not happy with it. But I think we've done a pretty poor job overall of managing the community well enough. There are over 1 million people that watch a talk on our YouTube channels every single day. That's a lot of people. And if I were to truly answer that question, it would be that we've done a terrible job of making sure that the community actually stays knit together. But I think there's this one fundamental that we've sort of held on to very, very tightly, is that the reason people connect with us is the value that we offer is access to remarkable people who you can get emotional about. So if you read the comments of Josh Talks, they are not like "great job, man," or they're not like comments you could expect on a YouTube video. They are emotional essays. People are pouring out like they are talking to their therapist. That is our value proposition, that feeling that people get, and we've just lived up to that every single day. And I think that's the reason that the community has stuck together. There is no, I think, so if you look at, so one of the ways to manage a community on YouTube very well is there is actually a community section. You can actually post things there and use that. We've done a terrible job of using that. So if you see a lot of the things we've done there, they are not very good. But I think we realized this very early on, where we were always very short on resources, primarily money, and we wanted to run a profitable business. So because that we had to keep juggling between what to prioritize, and it just all. And I think one of the things that in retrospect, at least in the future, we'll definitely look back and say that we made a mistake, is that we should have valued community higher a lot sooner. Now we are at a place where we have a product which is Josh Skills, which is a mobile app that's completely separate from these 1 million views. That's on a completely different portal. And now we need to drive downloads and purchases on this product. And we're having a pretty hard time getting that done. Now, of course, we'll be able to figure that out. But we haven't yet completely figured it out.
Speaking of which, we like to ask this question at the end of talks like this. Oh, you know what? Shall we take one question from Sarah, actually?
Go, Sarah.
I was going to wrap this up with what we call our doner kebab question, but I'll come to that later. Sarah, please unmute yourself and ask your question.
Sorry, Rishad. I had a photo finish question. But yeah.
Go for it. This is awesome.
Yeah, so I wanted to, this might be a bit more specific, but I wanted to learn more about your experience, your journey, and your challenges to making sure that Josh Talks is available in multiple languages, because that's something that we see a lot of, and that while there are a lot of resources online, they tend to be in English, or you need to have learned the English language in order to understand them. So I wanted to hear about your experience and your strategy challenges to translating these courses. So I highlighted, for instance, I was looking through your site while listening to your talk. You're both very inspirational, by the way. But as I was looking, and I saw that you have a computer skills course. And I asked this question because I am part of a nonprofit that also does a lot of that seeks to translate some more resources on digital rights, on media freedom, and all that in multiple languages in the Asia Pacific. And this is a challenge that we always have, because there is a lot of technical language that is difficult to accurately translate from let's say, I'm sure already from English to Hindi there are going to be some words that are difficult to translate. What more to the different vernaculars that are not as widely spoken. So, thank you.
Supriya, want to take that?
Yeah. So, so I think one of the decisions that we took early on when we started vernacular languages, one was that we didn't want to rely on translation and dubbing, because, like you rightly said, there is a lot that gets lost in translation, and you lose authenticity of the content that you're actually creating. So it was pretty challenging for us to actually build a team who natively spoke those languages. But we decided that we wanted to produce content in that language from the very beginning. So even in terms of our courses, we don't look at it as one that, we'll create a computer skills course in English and then we'll translate the same into Hindi or the same into Marathi or Bengali. We do use the same outline. However, we produce that course content separately using a native speaker and then add the nuances of that language individually there. Because the one thing that we've stressed upon and have worked towards is making sure that our content is relatable. And that changes language to language, and translation doesn't solve for that problem. So for example, when, if you're a Punjabi like me or you're from North India, the food that you'll always reference or talk about is butter chicken. But when you go down south, that's not something that people like. So even when you move from language to language, the names that you take, the kind of interaction that you have, the content that you build, everything that we've tried to do has been circled around references that are relatable to people who do speak in that language, so native to their area. It's extremely cost consuming. It takes the life out of you. There are things that you don't even understand because you don't speak the language. But what we've seen is that we've been able to maintain authenticity doing that. And people are happy with the content that we produce.
On that note, we are slightly over time now, and we just want to wrap this up so that people can get to their other meetings and whatnot. Supriya, Shobhit, this has been just incredible. I mean, you look at some of the faces here on the screen, and some people are like just completely blown away by what you said, as though we have never heard this stuff in our lives before, which is true. This knowledge and this insight.
We've been looking at Janicia's face, and
I know.
We know that there's a question or a comment or a chat brewing in there, but we're sometimes scared to ask her. Janicia is saying, I think they should run the country. Oh my goodness.
Please don't with any ideas.
I think they should run more than the country. More than just the country. Guys, this has been, this has been something. I mean, I'm going to sit down on my desk and cry quietly after this. This is really something. Thank you so much for what you do.
Thanks a lot, guys. And thanks a lot, Sandeep. I just saw your message. We will definitely take you up on that.
Yes.
We are coming to Australia soon.
Anytime.
Thank you for your time, and also thank you to our friends at MDIF. Pat, thank you for showing us what these guys do, because it's really been it's given me a whole different way of looking at what media is meant to do, right? So thank you for that.
Absolutely.
No, it's all Kirill. It's Kirill's credit. Kirill, and of course the amazing team from Box. I am blown away. I think we're all a little bit emotional.
I know, seriously.
We all are.
Absolutely right. Thank you so much for what you do, guys. You really are, please keep on keeping on. Thank you. Thank you, everybody.
Thanks a lot, guys.
Everybody for coming.
Nice MDIF, everyone. Thanks a lot.
Thank you.